U.S. President Donald Trump has extended its ultimatum to strike Iranian power plants by 5 days, raising hopes for a diplomatic breakthrough. He says Washington is holding productive talks with Tehran, but Iran flatly denies there have been any negotiations. And South Korea's cabinet approves bills creating the Public Prosecution Office and Major Crimes Investigation Agency, finalizing a major restructuring of the nation's criminal justice system. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un labels South Korea the most hostile state, warning of merciless retaliation over any provocation. His remarks come as he secures a third term as chairman of the State Affairs Commission. We begin with the situation in the Middle East. Roughly 12 hours before the end of his 48-hour ultimatum to Iran, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 5-day pause on his deadline, citing alleged communication between Washington and Tehran. Iran, however, flatly denied any interaction. Our Kim Do-yeon leads our coverage tonight.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced a sudden shift in military plans against Tehran on Monday, saying that talks between the U.S. and Iran have seen progress. While Iran denied that discussions had taken place, President Trump ordered a 5-day postponement of threatened attacks targeting Iranian energy infrastructure. Trump had given Iran 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face attacks on its power plants, but has shifted his stance as that deadline approaches.
I think there's a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal, and so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us.
The U.S. leader indicated that initial contact could pave the way for a permanent resolution to the ongoing conflict and address Washington's core demands.
So we are now having really good discussions. They started last night, a little bit, the night before that. And I think they're very good. They want peace. They've agreed they will not have a nuclear weapon.
The suspension is being closely watched by U.S. allies in the region. After a call with President Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that any diplomatic outcome must secure his country's strategic goals.
President Trump believes there is a possibility to leveraging the mighty achievements obtained by the IDF and the U.S. military in order to realize the goals of the war in a deal that will preserve our vital interests.
Tehran, however, remains firm that Trump's claims are fake news, with officials accusing Washington of fabricating the talks to buy time. The Iranian military also dismissed Western intelligence reports about the deployment of explosives in regional waterways and reaffirmed its control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Given this level of control and capability, there is no need to lay mines in the Persian Gulf. However, if necessary, we will use all available means to ensure security.
With the 5-day suspension now in effect, Washington's deadline for a negotiated resolution has been extended to this Saturday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted the importance of a proactive stance to better address the broader potential fallout from the ongoing unrest in the Middle East. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Devising an emergency response system in a preemptive manner so that the conflict in the Middle East does not pose grave threats to lives in Korea. That's what President Lee Jae-myung has instructed his officials to do, with response measures topping Tuesday's cabinet meeting agenda for a third straight week.
각 부처는 수급 우려 품목을 포괄적이고 꼼꼼하게 점검하시고 또 그것들이 국민의 일상에 미칠 영향 그리고 대체 공급선은 어디인지 등을 세밀하게 파악해서 최악의 상황까지 가정한 대비책을 철저하게.
With global oil prices rising, authorities will update the fuel price cap rule and announce it later this week. The president also vowed to strongly punish any attempts at price collusion, adding that the prosecution has launched investigations into oil refiners.
정유업계도 국가 기관 산업으로서의 공적 책무를 깊이 인식하고 국가적 위기 극복 노력에 함께 동참해 주시기 바랍니다.
To reduce private vehicle use on workdays, public institutions will adopt a system limiting use based on the last digit of license plate numbers. As for private firms, Yi asked them to join the campaign to save energy. President Yi revisited the need to swiftly organize a war response extra budget.
왜 세금으로 지원하냐? 빚내서 지원 또 하는 거냐? 퍼주냐? 왜 지역화폐로 주냐? 뭐 이런 등등의 지적이 있어요. 그래서 이번 추경은 초과세수, 예상되는 초과세수라는 거지 빚내서 하는 거 절대 아닙니다. 그리고 빚내서 만약 초과세수가 없었다면 빚을 내서라도 해야 돼요.
He added the tax revenues exceeded expectations in the second half of last year as the economy started to improve. All this as the International Energy Agency warns of the greatest global energy security threat in history. South Korea is one of the world's largest energy buyers, with the Middle East being a major source. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The U.S.-Iran conflict is forcing Washington's allies to navigate growing security and energy risks as the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively disrupted. They are under dual pressure as Tehran is threatening further retaliation against Gulf infrastructure, while Washington demands allies join its cause. For more on how the Allied response is taking shape, we turn to our reporter Oh Soo-young, who joins me live in the studio with us. A big welcome, Soo-young.
Great to be with you, Morgan.
So I was asked, how are American allies responding at this point? It seems as though they're coming with a joint response.
Yes, as you said, it does rather seem that US allies are moving together to jointly respond to this dual dilemma that they have. They're exposed to the shipping and energy fallout from the Strait of Hormuz, but for many reasons it's untenable to send military support to secure the waterway as the US is demanding. On Sunday, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte told Fox News that a group of 22 countries, including South Korea, Japan, the UAE and Bahrain, were now coming together to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And that came after last Friday's joint statement led by Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan and Canada, which was later widened to include South Korea and others. The signatories said that they were ready to contribute appropriate efforts to secure passage of the Hormuz and stabilize energy markets. However, they did not commit to any military action or deployment. Mark Rutte himself also didn't make any such declarations. He rather played to an American audience, though. He emphasized the need to secure the Hormuz and the dangers that an Iranian nuclear weapons program would pose. And this is what experts had to say.
Right now, most countries are trying not to appear as though they'll join U.S. military operations. They're aiming for some kind of arrangement with Iran through negotiations to secure safe passage. So statements like this are just enough to signal that they're not all opposed to the U.S. That seems to be the guiding principle and the limit of most countries' actions.
Nations like France, South Korea, and Japan all do not want to become involved in the war with Iran, but they cannot simply refuse the U.S. So they're considering ways to contribute in other ways. This war with Iran doesn't seem to have a clear mandate that can justify the sacrifices made to participate. That is why governments cannot help but be cautious.
Right. So it seems as though they all have a cautious stance regarding this. But what are they actually doing, Soo-young?
Well, they are taking great steps to manage the situation diplomatically, I would say. It's an incredibly precarious situation where Tehran has threatened retaliation against regional energy infrastructure if its own power facilities are struck, while also warning of wider disruption around the Strait of Hormuz. On Monday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun spoke with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, urging Tehran to stop strikes on civilians and civilian facilities, and he also called for safe navigation through the strait. And Cho also spoke with his counterparts in the Netherlands, France, Oman and Kuwait over the past 24 hours. Tokyo has always it's also communicated with Tehran about the passage of Japanese-related vessels. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has also spoken with Arachi and separately with officials from South Korea, Turkey and Qatar. So what we're seeing here is that US allies or aligned partners, they're really trying to keep those direct lines open with Iran while also consulting with each other as they press for restraint and, of course, the free and safe navigation of vessels along the straits.
Right. So we are now about a month into this current conflict situation. Where do you think things could go now from here?
Well, I would say it's absolutely vital for the allies to maintain this dialogue channel, to maintain this diplomacy, because, well, as much as President Donald Trump has been, politically calling on allies to help out the US in the Strait of Hormuz, it's absolutely politically untenable for to actually sell this war to these democratic nations, their public, especially with this lack of mandate. So what's key going forward is for these allied countries to continue this conversation, to keep those direct channels open with both Washington and Tehran, really pushing them to de-escalate. And going forward in the longer term, I would say it's a huge inflection point for allied countries to really think about their longer term security options. And this is what experts had to say.
Countries in similar circumstances, such as South Korea, Japan, France, Germany, and the UK, should form a security network among themselves. When the U.S. is unable to focus on the Korean Peninsula or on Europe because of Iran or some other issue, it becomes important for countries facing similar challenges to prepare, not a substitute, but some kind of supplementary mechanism for security.
Well, we'll certainly hope for the situation to de-escalate as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your report today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Turning to the economy, a dramatic drop in the price of gold has unsettled investors in recent times. Our correspondent Park Jun-han takes a look at the reasons behind the plunge in price.
The price of the safe haven asset gold has been showing volatility in recent months. Hitting over $5,600 per troy ounce in late January, the gold price as of Tuesday is trading at around $4,300, down over 20% in just less than 2 months. Largely, this is due to fears stemming from the conflict in the Middle East outweighing the demand for gold as a safe haven. This comes as a surprise, as during geopolitical tensions or periods of uncertainty, demand for precious metals such as gold and silver, among others, is boosted. Instead, surging oil prices triggered by the war have reignited fears of global inflation. Also, higher energy costs are reducing expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve and other central banks will cut interest rates at their upcoming rate-setting meetings.
But the biggest thing probably is investors are concerned that it's had a big run. They're concerned that there are not going to be interest rate cuts. So you're going to lose more opportunity cost of holding it versus getting some type of interest off of gold.
Because gold prices are sensitive to interest rates, oil prices, and the value of the dollar, any meaningful peace deals in the Middle East and eased inflation risks could help gold prices bounce back. Despite the sharp correction and short-term volatility, major banks have not lowered their 2026 targets. JP Morgan forecasts gold reaching $6,300 per ounce by the end of 2026, while Bank of America maintained its $6,000 target. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
The United States is stepping up pressure on countries, including South Korea, to give up their developing country status at the World Trade Organization. A new reform report argues the current system gives unfair advantages to advanced economies. Kim Jun-hong explains.
The United States is stepping up pressure on countries, including South Korea, to give up their developing country status at the World Trade Organization. The U.S. Trade Representative released a reform report on Tuesday, signaling Washington's intent to crack down on what it sees as free riding within the WTO system. Citing U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, the report describes the current global order in international trade as untenable and unsustainable. Washington argues that reforming special and differential treatment, or SDT, is key to restoring the organization's credibility. SDT allows developing countries greater flexibility, including slower tariff cuts and extended timelines for implementing trade commitments. At the heart of the issue is the WTO's binary classification of developed and developing countries, which Washington says no longer reflects today's economic realities. Under the current system, highly developed economies can still self-declare as developing countries and receive preferential treatment. The report points to 4 countries: Brazil, Singapore, South Korea, and Costa Rica. It says that although such nations pledged to forego SDT provisions in past negotiations, they still retain self-declared developing country status. The United States also outlined reform steps proposing stronger incentives for countries that comply with notification requirements by properly reporting trade-related measures. Washington also called for clearer objective criteria to determine developing country status. Based on the report, the U.S. is expected to press hard for reform at the WTO Ministerial Conference, set to open in the coming days. Rising protectionism driven by the tariff policies of the Donald Trump administration has put the multilateral trading system under mounting strain. South Korea chose to keep its developing country status in 2019 while opting not to seek the associated benefits. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
South Korea's cabinet today approved 2 bills aimed at stripping prosecutors of their investigative powers. The bills stipulate creating 2 new agencies, one that will exclusively handle investigations under the Interior Ministry and the other in charge of indictments under the Justice Ministry. The investigation agency will look into 6 major crimes, including corruption and those related to the economy or drugs. The current prosecutor's office will be abolished in October, the first major change in 78 years following decades of debate over readjusting the prosecutor's powers. The legislation was led by the ruling Democratic Party amid objections from the main opposition People Power Party. South Korea expressed strong regret on Tuesday over Japan's approval of high school textbooks that claim Dokdo as Japanese territory, urging immediate corrections. The Foreign Ministry summoned Hirotaka Matsuo, deputy chief of mission at the Japanese embassy, to lodge a complaint saying the country cannot accept any such claims. Seoul also protested Japan's approval of textbook passages that downplay the coercive nature of wartime forced labor and sexual slavery by the Japanese military. The ministry stressed that a correct understanding of history among future generations is essential for building future-oriented ties between the 2 countries and urged Japan to take a more responsible approach to history education. And across the border, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has reaffirmed his commitment to nuclear weapons and renewed his hostile rhetoric towards South Korea, warning of harsh consequences if Pyongyang is provoked. Lee Seung-jae has this report.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has formally labeled South Korea the most hostile state and warned of merciless consequences if Pyongyang is provoked. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday, Kim made the remarks on the final day of the first session of the Supreme People's Assembly, declaring that Seoul has now been officially designated as North Korea's principal adversary. He warned that South Korea would pay the price for any provocation and reaffirmed that North Korea's status as a nuclear weapons state will never change, vowing continued efforts to confront what he described as hostile forces. The comments came as Kim secured a 3rd consecutive term as chairman of the State Affairs Commission, the country's top policy guidance body created in 2016. His re-election was confirmed during the parliamentary session held on Sunday. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated Kim on his re-election and expressed hope for deeper cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. In a message released by the Kremlin on Monday, Putin praised Kim's role in strengthening what he called a friendly and allied relationship between the 2 countries, adding that continued collaboration would serve their fundamental national interests. ties between Russia and North Korea have strengthened in recent years. The two countries signed a mutual defense treaty in 2024, and North Korea has sent troops to support Russia's war effort in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov also said Kim has a standing invitation to visit Russia, noting that Moscow would welcome him once diplomatic channels finalize the timing. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And on the big screen, the film The King's Warden continues to gather moviegoers, ranking third on Korea's all-time admissions chart. Our correspondent Cho Young-eun has more.
Over the weekend, the film drew more than 800,000 moviegoers nationwide, holding the #1 spot for a 7th consecutive week and bringing its cumulative audience to 14.84 million. With this milestone, the film has become the third most watched movie in Korea's box office history, following The Admiral Roaring Currents, which drew 17.61 million viewers, and Extreme Job, which recorded 16.26 million admissions. Since its release on February 4, the film has shown no signs of slowing down. Directed by Jang Hang-jun, it marks his first film to surpass 10 million admissions, a milestone that even the director himself said took him by surprise. The film has also set a new all-time revenue record, surpassing 142.5 billion won, according to the Korean Film Council. The drama follows the exile of young King Danjong during the Joseon Dynasty, captivating audiences and gaining widespread popularity. Amid this, the cast has been actively meeting audiences through theater events, further spotlighting the film's semi-historical narrative.
We never expected this much love for our film, and we don't know how to thank everyone enough.
There will be various programs where you can experience King Danjong's story more closely. We hope many people will join.
The film's broader cultural impact is also gaining momentum. With its unpredictable box office trajectory, The King's Warden is setting a new benchmark for the Korean film industry, drawing attention to where its final total will land. As it approaches the 15 million mark, the film will also be screened nationwide from April 6 to 20 in an inclusive format featuring audio descriptions and Korean subtitles. Its overseas rollout is gaining momentum. Having launched in the US on February 13, it is now screening in over 50 cities across the US and Canada, further expanding its global reach. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
In other news, BTS fever is spreading beyond the concert stage in Seoul. Museums are welcoming global fans with special exhibitions and events. Jung Hae-rim shows us how.
BTS's comeback show may be over, but fans can relive the energy in Seoul. Following the weekend concert, major national institutions are welcoming the influx of global fans with special exhibitions and events incorporated with Korean culture. At the National Museum of Korea, fans can view traditional artifacts such as the 10-story stone pagoda and moon jar, pieces known to have captured the BTS members' interest, with an English guide provided. But the experience goes beyond the exhibits. A major highlight is the exclusive collaboration between BTS's fifth album Arirang and the museum's official merchandise brand Mute. Fans have been buying items ranging from traditional Korean-themed hairpins to modern clothing and bags, blending Korea's rich heritage with the group's new music.
I think that's the highlight. Like they try to incorporate the national treasure, if I'm not mistaken, like the bell, into the merch. So I think it's a really nice touch. Also Korean, also BTS.
Over at the National Folk Museum, games that members actually played from the popular YouTube show Run BTS have been brought to life. The outdoor K-playground offers tourists a chance to try their hand at traditional games like spinning tops or 팽이, 투호, 제기차기, and 딱지치기. Visitors laugh and show enthusiasm for Korea's oldest games.
Bullseye or not, games like 투호 and spinning tops offer a truly unique experience. By playing traditional Korean games, fans aren't just having fun. They're connecting with their favorite stars on a whole new level.
Over at the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art's dedicated listening space, Love Quarter, fans dive into a completely different vibe. Bathed in blue light, the space is filled with BTS's new title track, Swim. Paper installations move with the wind like ocean waves, giving visitors the surreal sensation of swimming through the music as they read the lyrics surrounding them.
It's great. I mean, it has like a lot of like the lyrics, and it's really nice to see it. It really feels like you're in the ocean, so like it's a very immersive experience.
The cultural celebration extends to other venues as well, featuring a BTS time capsule at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History and an exhibition of Korean literature that inspired the group's music at the National Library. 정혜림, Arirang News.
It really feels like spring is settling in, but with stagnant air, fine dust is building up. Tomorrow, ultra fine dust levels will reach bad across the capital area, the Chungcheong-do provinces, inland Gangwon-do province, and Jeollabuk-do province. Meanwhile, rain will begin on Jeju-do Island late at night and by early tomorrow morning. It'll spread to the southern coast before tapering off around midday. Rainfall will remain light, less than 5 millimeters along the southern coast and around 5 to 10 millimeters on Jeju-do Island. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 8 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 4 degrees, Busan at 11 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 19 degrees, Chuncheon at 21 degrees, Jeju at 18 degrees. Once the rain clears, we'll see clear skies nationwide through the weekend, with large day-to-night temperature swings continuing. That's all for Korea. Here's a look at the weather around the world.
And that's all we have for tonight. Thank you for watching. This was Kim Mo-gyan filling in for Kim Dami, and I'll be back with Within the Frame at 8:30 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned.